What is the Didache, and why isn't it considered canon? Shalom, everyone. Today I want to share something kind of fascinating, something you might not hear about often, but it gives us a really cool glimpse into the early days of the faith. It's called the Didache. Sounds fancy, right? It's a Greek word that just means teaching. And this document, it's like one of the first how-to guides for believers. Seriously, think of it as the ancient version of a starter kit for following Yeshua back in the 1st or 2nd century. Like, so you believe in the Messiah? Now what? That kind of thing. Today we're diving into an intriguing piece of early Christian literature known as the Didache. We'll explore what it is and discuss why it didn't make it into the official biblical canon. The Didache, meaning teaching in Greek, is an early Christian treatise, also known as the teaching of the Lord to the Gentiles by the 12 apostles, believed to be written in the late 1st or early 2nd century. Served as a manual for Christian ethics, rituals, and church organization. So, what is the Didache? Well, its full title is The Teaching of the Lord to the Gentiles by the 12 Apostles. Pretty bold name. It was probably written sometime in the late 1st century or early 2nd century, so we're talking really close to the time of the Apostles. The Didache talks about some really practical stuff. How to live a godly life, how to treat people, how to fast, how to baptize, how to share a meal that later developed into what we call the Lord's Supper. It even gives guidance on what to do when traveling teachers or prophets come to your town. Like, here's how to tell if this guy is legit or just mooching food off you. What's in it? Ethical teachings. Outlines the way of life and the way of death, guiding moral behavior. Ritual instructions. Provides directives on practices like baptism and the Eucharist. Church organization. Discusses roles of itinerant apostles, prophets, bishops, and deacons. The Didache is broken into a few parts. Ethical teaching. It opens with something kind of poetic. The way of life and the way of death. It's pretty black and white, laying out what a righteous life looks like versus one that's headed down the wrong path. Rituals. It explains how baptism should be done, when to fast, and how to handle the Lord's meal. Spoiler, they fasted on Wednesdays and Fridays, not the same days as the hypocrites. Burn. Community rules. It talks about how to recognize real apostles and prophets, and encourages each community to appoint trustworthy local leaders. Why does this matter? Considered one of the earliest examples of Christian church orders. Reflects how Jewish Christians adapted practices for Gentile converts. Shares similarities with the Gospel of Matthew, indicating common community origins. It's part of the collection known as Apostolic Fathers. Honestly, it's just really cool to see how early believers were figuring things out. I mean, they didn't have YouTube or 1,000 study Bibles. They were trying to stay faithful, raise families, welcome new Gentiles into a very Jewish-rooted faith, and all this while Rome is breathing down their necks. This little guide shows us how they navigated all that. But wait, why isn't it in the Bible then? Good question. The Didache was definitely respected by the early believers, but it didn't quite make it into the official canon. And here's why. First off, it's anonymous. We don't know who wrote it. One of the big criteria for something to be considered scripture was that it had to come from an apostle or someone closely connected to one. The Didache was lost for centuries and rediscovered in 1873 by Philotheus Brinois, I'm sure I butchered that name, in a monastery in Constantinople. Second, it wasn't widely used across all the early congregations. Some regions loved it. Others, not so much. And then, it's mostly a how-to manual. Very practical. Not exactly heavy on revelation or prophecy. So, it didn't meet all the criteria for something inspired and eternal, like the Gospels or the letters from Paul. Although, I kind of disagree with those letters from Paul in some areas, but that's just my opinion. Nonetheless, its discovery provided valuable insights into early Christian practices and beliefs. It kind of hovered on the edge of canon for a while. Some early church leaders mentioned it with admiration, but they usually lumped it in with other good but not quite scripture writings. The definition of the biblical canon is: the biblical canon is the collection of books recognized as authoritative scripture. The canon was established over several centuries, with debates and councils determining which books were included. Early church leaders used several criteria to determine if a book should be included in the canon. Apostolic origin. Was the book written by an apostle or someone close to one? Universal acceptance. Was it widely accepted and used by early Christian communities? Liturgical use. Was it read publicly during worship services? Consistent message. Did its teachings align with accepted Christian doctrine? So why isn't the Didache canonical? Authorship uncertainty. The Didache is anonymous, lacking clear apostolic authorship. Limited early use. It wasn't universally used or accepted across all early Christian communities. Supplementary nature. While valuable, it was seen more as a manual or guide rather than inspired scripture. So, what's the point? Though not part of the canonical Bible, the Didache is respected for its historical and theological insights. It offers a window into the beliefs and practices of the earliest believers. Some traditions, like the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, included in their broader biblical collections. Even though it's not part of the Bible, the Didache gives us something valuable. It shows us how the earliest believers were already trying to live out the teachings of Yeshua in a chaotic, pluralistic world. They weren't perfect, but they were sincere. They were watching, praying, and trying to live holy lives as best they could. And honestly, a lot of what they wrote down still applies to us. Be generous. Be careful who you trust. Fast, pray, and live like Yeshua is coming back soon, because he is. The Didache is a fascinating document that sheds light on early Christian life. While it didn't meet the criteria for inclusion in the biblical canon, its teachings continue to inform and inspire scholars and believers alike. So yeah, the Didache might not be canon, but it's like a time capsule. It helps us connect with those early brothers and sisters who were figuring things out. just like we are today. Anyway, that's my little history nerd moment for the day. If you've got questions about it, or if you just want to nerd out with me about early believer stuff, I'm all ears. Hit me up in those comments. Feel free to ask any questions or share your thoughts on the Didache and its place in early Christianity. Thanks for hanging out and listening today, my friends and my family. Until next time, Shalom, Shalom.